The kindest people are often the ones nobody notices. They move through long days and late nights, doing small things that never make headlines: a refill, a smile, a gentle word at the right time. But sometimes, those small things become someone's reason to keep coming back. For Mara, that reason was an old man named Arthur. He came to the diner every evening just before closing, polite, soft-spoken, always sitting at the same booth by the window. She didn't know much about him, only that he liked his tea with 2 sugars and never stayed long after. Still, she looked forward to seeing him more than she'd ever admit. That night was no different, until the bell above the door rang, and a man stepped in. Not loud, not hurried, just the kind of presence that made people look up without knowing why. His eyes went straight to Arthur's booth, and in that quiet moment, Mara learned a lesson that would remind her that no act of kindness ever really goes unnoticed. Before we continue, thank you for being here and for supporting these stories. What we share isn't just about Jason Statham or the moments he steps into a room. It's about people like Mara and Arthur, and the quiet ways kindness connects us when the world isn't watching. If you believe that small actions still matter, that compassion can outlive the moment it's given, then this story is for you. So take a second to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, because what happens next might stay with you longer than you think. The diner had its own kind of heartbeat: the soft clink of cups, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the hum of an old neon sign that blinked just enough to remind everyone it was still alive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. The kind of place where time didn't rush. It just sat quietly in the corner, watching people come and go. Mara had worked there for almost 3 years. She wasn't loud or confident like the other waitresses. Her smile was shy, her voice gentle, and her kindness came without effort. She was the sort of person you'd remember only after she was gone, not because she stood out, but because she made you feel like you did. Every evening, right around 6, an old man named Arthur would come in. Always the same booth by the window. Always the same order: chamomile tea with 2 sugars, no spoon. He'd unfold his newspaper, nod politely, and settle into the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Over time, Mara learned his rhythm the way musicians learn their favorite song. He'd sit down with a quiet sigh, read the same headlines twice, and then, after the first sip of tea, he'd talk. Not about the world, that part had already passed him by, but about the smaller things: the sound of rain on a tin roof, the smell of his wife's bread baking on Sundays, the way she'd hum when she thought no one was listening. At first, Mara just listened because it was polite, but after a while, she realized she looked forward to his stories. They made her feel less alone in a world that never seemed to slow down. She didn't know much about him beyond what he shared in passing: that he'd been a mechanic once, that he still took the bus everywhere because driving made him nervous now, and that his son lived somewhere busy and didn't visit much. He never said the son's name, and Mara never asked. Some nights Arthur stayed longer, watching the lights outside as if waiting for something that never came. Mara always made sure his tea stayed warm. She'd refill his cup without asking, and every time she did, he'd smile, that soft, grateful smile that felt like a thank you for more than just the drink. One rainy Tuesday, Arthur came in later than usual. He looked tired, slower on his feet, his hat damp from the weather. Mara rushed to hold the door for him. "You're out late, Mr. Arthur," she said softly. He chuckled. "Had to stop by the pharmacy. Took longer than it should have. Guess they make pills smaller every year so old men like me can chase them around longer." Mara smiled, helping him to his booth. "You still want the usual." He winked. "You remembered." She always remembered. She remembered that his wife's name had been Margaret, that she'd passed away 5 years ago in March, that their favorite song was Moon River, though the jukebox hadn't played it in decades. And she remembered that every time Arthur talked about his son, there was a pause, small but heavy, before he changed the subject. That night after his tea, Arthur told her about the day he met Margaret. "She was waiting for a bus," he said, eyes glassy with memory. "Umbrella in one hand, newspaper in the other. I asked if she'd let me carry her bag. She told me I looked too thin to carry anything heavier than guilt." Mara laughed, and Arthur joined her, a low, warm laugh that filled the diner like a familiar song. It was those moments that made the job bearable. The noise, the long hours, the tips that barely paid rent, they didn't matter when Arthur was there. He reminded her that simple kindness still meant something. But that night, as he reached the end of his story, the bell above the door rang. It wasn't unusual. The diner got late stragglers sometimes, delivery drivers, tired couples, people avoiding home. But this man was different. He walked in like he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once, tall, calm, eyes scanning the room not with impatience but purpose. He wore a dark coat, rain still clinging to the shoulders, and when his gaze met Arthur's, the old man froze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Arthur's trembling smile returned. "Well," he said quietly, "I'll be damned." Mara blinked, caught between curiosity and confusion. She glanced between them, then offered her practiced smile. "Evening. Would you like a table?" The man's voice was steady, low, unmistakably British. "No, thank you. I think I've already found one." He walked to Arthur's booth, and the two men looked at each other the way people do when words have been waiting for years but don't know how to start. "Could you bring another cup, Mara?" Arthur asked softly. "2 sugars, no spoon." She nodded, though her hands hesitated for a moment. She served hundreds of people, but something about this felt different, like she was watching something sacred she wasn't meant to interrupt. When she set the second cup down, she noticed how the stranger's hands didn't fidget or move unnecessarily. Everything he did was deliberate. He looked at Arthur with a quiet intensity that made even the rain outside sound softer. "You could have called," Arthur murmured. "I did," the man said. "You never answered." Arthur gave a small, broken smile. "I didn't think you meant it." "I always mean it," the man replied. Mara turned away to give them privacy, but their voices lingered in the air like a story told between breaths. "You look tired," the man said. "Tired of waiting, maybe," Arthur replied, "but I'm glad you came." The man's voice lowered. "I should have come sooner." When Mara returned to refill the teapot, she caught a softer moment, Arthur sliding an old photo across the table. 2 people dancing. The man smiled faintly when he saw it, brushing a thumb over the image. "She loved music," Arthur said. "I remember," came the quiet reply. Mara didn't stay long, but as she stepped away, she noticed Arthur's eyes bright again, like the years had momentarily lifted. When the man finally stood to leave, he placed a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover both teas, and looked toward her. "Thank you for taking care of him," he said simply. Mara shook her head, unsure what to say. "He's the one who takes care of me, sir." That made him smile, a small knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He gave Arthur's shoulder a gentle pat. "Get some rest, Dad." "Dad?" The word echoed in Mara's head long after he left. Arthur sat quietly, staring at the door long after it closed. Mara waited, unsure if he wanted to talk. Eventually he looked up at her and said, "That was my boy." "I figured," she said softly. "He seems kind." Arthur nodded slowly. "He is just different. Life hardens people, you know, but he's got a good heart, always did." He didn't say much after that. When Mara brought his check, she found a few extra coins placed neatly beside it, and under the saucer a small note in careful handwriting. "Thank you for making this place feel like home." She kept that note. Every night after that she'd glance at the booth before closing, half expecting to see him there, the old man with his stories and his smile. Sometimes he'd come, sometimes he wouldn't. And every time he did, he seemed a little weaker, a little slower. But he still tipped his hat, still thanked her like she'd done something remarkable when all she'd done was listen. Then one Thursday evening, he didn't come at all. At first she thought maybe the rain kept him home. But when Friday came, then Saturday, and still no Arthur, the booth by the window began to feel wrong, empty in a way that silence couldn't fill. She asked the bus driver who sometimes dropped him off, but he hadn't seen him in days. She called the pharmacy where Arthur picked up his medication, but they wouldn't say much, only that someone else had been by earlier to collect his prescriptions. By Sunday she found herself setting the tea anyway, 2 sugars, no spoon. She sat in the opposite booth and watched the steam curl upward. The city outside kept moving, people rushing past windows, cars splashing through puddles, the world doing what it always does when someone quietly disappears. It forgets. Mara didn't. That night when she finished her shift, she stood outside the diner and looked down the street, half hoping she'd see Arthur walking slowly toward her. Instead, she saw someone else. The same man from before. He was standing under the awning, rain dripping from his coat, eyes on the diner like he'd been there a while. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement, neither greeting nor goodbye, and then turned, disappearing into the rain. Mara didn't know what it meant then. She just knew the world felt heavier that night. Later, when she went to wipe down Arthur's table, she found another envelope under the sugar jar. Her name was written on it in trembling ink. Inside was a folded piece of paper, Arthur's handwriting again, shaky but sure. If you're reading this, I'm probably where she's been waiting. Don't be sad, Mara. You made these last months feel like life again. I told my boy about you. Said the world could use more people like the girl at the diner. She sat there for a long time, holding the note in both hands, tears falling quietly onto the counter. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. But for the first time, Mara let it fall not as noise, but as memory. The diner never felt the same after Arthur stopped coming. Mara still cleaned the window by his booth every morning, even though no one sat there anymore. It wasn't habit, it was respect. Some people leave behind noise, others leave behind silence that keeps echoing long after they're gone. Arthur had been one of the latter. Weeks passed. The seasons began to turn. Regulars came and went. The coffee machine hissed the same tune every night, and the city outside kept moving like it always did. But Mara found herself glancing at the door every time the bell jingled, expecting a familiar hat, an old smile, a quiet evening Mara. It never came. Still, she left a cup of tea at his booth once a week, 2 sugars, no spoon. The manager thought it was sentimental nonsense. The cook just shook his head, but the other waitresses noticed. Some started leaving their own small offerings, a folded napkin, a coin, a flower from a nearby stand. Arthur had touched more lives than anyone realized. But Mara, she missed him most. It wasn't just his stories or his kindness. It was what he represented, proof that goodness didn't have to shout to be heard. She'd lost people before, but losing Arthur felt like losing a piece of home. One night, almost a month after his passing, the diner was quiet, too quiet. Only a couple of tables were occupied. Mara was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door rang. She didn't look up at first. The sound had become muscle memory. "Evening," she said automatically. "Seat yourself wherever you'd like." But when she glanced toward the doorway, she froze. It was him, the man from that night. The one who had sat across from Arthur. The one who had said, "Get some rest, Dad." He looked the same, calm, unreadable, carrying an energy that didn't demand attention but drew it anyway. His coat was darker this time, his hair damp from the light drizzle outside. Their eyes met. He nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, before walking toward Arthur's old booth. Mara's voice caught in her throat. Good evening. Would you like something to drink?" He glanced at the empty table, then at her. "Chamomile tea, 2 sugars, no spoon." Her heart twisted. "Of course," she whispered. As she prepared it, her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't sure what to say when she brought it over. "I'm sorry for your loss" felt too small, too rehearsed. So she didn't say anything. She just set it down quietly. He looked up at her. "You're Mara." She blinked. "Ah, yes, how did you?" "My father talked about you," he said simply. "Quite a bit, actually." She tried to smile, but her throat tightened. "He was a wonderful man." Jason nodded, his eyes softening. "He was. I didn't realize how wonderful until it was too late." Silence hung between them, gentle but heavy. The kind that fills a room when both people are thinking about the same ghost. Jason finally spoke again. "He used to write me letters. I found them after he passed." He looked down, tracing the rim of the cup with a finger. "He never sent most of them, but he wrote about this place, about you." Mara's breath caught. "About me." "He said there was a girl at the diner who listened better than most people ever did. That you treated him like a person, not an old man waiting to disappear." Her eyes blurred with tears before she could stop them. "He was never a burden." Jason gave a small smile. He knew that's why he kept coming back. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The rain outside softened, tapping against the windows in a rhythm that felt almost like memory. Mara sat opposite him, hesitant, but drawn by something that felt unfinished. Jason looked at the empty space beside him. "I didn't visit as much as I should have," he said quietly. "He used to call and I'd say I was busy. There was always another job, another flight, another excuse." Mara shook her head. "He never blamed you." "I know," Jason said. "That's what makes it harder." He looked at her again, his gaze steady. "You kept him company when I couldn't. That matters more than you think." She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't. She just nodded, her voice small. "He was my friend." Jason leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. "You remind me of him a bit. Quiet but not empty, the kind of quiet that listens." It wasn't meant as flattery, it sounded like truth. He left shortly after, leaving money on the table like before. But when she went to clear it, she found an envelope under the cup. Her name again, Mara. Inside was a folded note, written in his hand. "He said you wanted to go back to school. Consider this a start. My father believed in you, so do I. J.S." There was a second paper behind it, a printed form from a local university, a scholarship confirmation. Full tuition, first term already paid. Mara sat down in the booth, the world tilting around her. She read the note again and again until the words blurred. Her coworker Dana walked by and stopped short. "Mara, you okay?" Mara smiled through tears. "Yeah," she whispered. I think someone just gave me a second chance." That night Mara stayed long after closing. She brewed one last cup of tea, chamomile, 2 sugars, no spoon, and set it on the window booth. She placed the note beside it, the edges damp from her tears. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. Outside, across the street, Jason stood under a flickering streetlight. He watched her through the glass, not intruding, just witnessing. He saw her gently fold the napkin, smile at the empty seat, and close her eyes for a moment of quiet. He didn't go back inside. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, an old photo. Arthur and Margaret, dancing, young, laughing, alive. He looked at it for a long moment, then tucked it away. The rain began again, soft and steady. Jason turned and walked down the street, his silhouette fading beneath the streetlights. There was no music, no grand farewell, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who knew his father's kindness hadn't been lost to the world. The next morning, when Mara arrived for her shift, she found the booth by the window freshly cleaned. On the table sat a single white rose and a small card. For the girl who never stopped listening. No signature, no initials, just that. She pressed the card to her chest, smiling through tears. Then she set down her tray and got to work, same uniform, same routine, same world. But something in her was lighter now. She didn't tell anyone what happened. Some things are too pure for gossip. That evening, a young man came in for dinner, a student, new in town, nervous. Mara smiled, brought him a menu, and noticed how he tapped the table nervously, unsure of himself. She poured his tea before he asked. 2 sugars, she said with a small grin. No spoon. He looked up surprised. How'd you know? She just smiled. Lucky guess. And outside, beyond the window's reflection, a black car waited at the curb for a moment before quietly pulling away. Inside it, Jasonstatham glanced once at the diner, the soft light, the girl at the counter, the empty booth that wasn't really empty anymore, and let a small smile touch his face. He didn't stay for thanks, he never did. For him, the story wasn't about what was lost, it was about what was left behind. And as the diner lights flickered in the rain, Mara looked out the window, feeling the warmth of something she couldn't name. Maybe kindness doesn't end when people leave. Maybe it just finds new hands to carry it forward.